ஒரு மகத்தான அலை உருவாக்கிடலாமா? அலை 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 அலை.
Well, in the yogic sciences, we do not accord the kind of significance that modern physiology accords to the brain. We see brain just as body. It is just body, it is one more aspect of the body. But mind, or what we are referring to as mind, the English word mind is not specific, it's kind of too general. Normally, we identify four parts to what we now talking about as mind. The moment you use the English language, you kind of speaking, when it comes to anything internal, we are talking in more generalities, not specific. So if you want specifics, well, we identify something called as buddhi, which is the intellect, which I feel largely in modern societies, they are considering intellect as mind. Essentially, I'm not saying this with any prejudice because I'm talking in terms of where these things have evolved. The European culture has recognized intellect as mind. In the yogic sciences, we see intellect only as an instrument of survival, which functions on the basis of the limited data that we have gathered through our sensory perceptions. Intellect is quite a useless thing if you do not have data. If there is no data, intellect cannot function. So intellect is very much like why today your phone has an intellect of its own. Yes, it has data and it can use it. If it doesn't yet have, I don't know what… you're shaking your head, Stephen, I think you're using a bad phone.
Well, I will…
You still are Nokia, I think.
I think even the best iPhone is still quite stupid, isn't it? It has no subjective experience. So because we talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning and…
Yes, but I'm talking about intellect. Intellect means it has data, using the data, it will do permutations and combinations, which the phone is beginning to do, maybe not to the same level as a human intellect, but it is beginning to do that activity. Even among human beings, not every human being is able to process the same amount of data and with the same complexity and sophistication. So, well, you have the brain of a monk, but you must also have a brain of a politician, and then you would know what I'm talking about.
It's classified. But…
No, these days they are smart, it's not like old times, okay? So, I'm saying this intellectual process is being generally spoken of as mind. That's not how we look at it. We see intellect is called buddhi, which is essentially functioning out of limited data that it has gathered. Largely conscious data. Sometimes it accesses data which is not very conscious, but largely it functions only out of conscious data. You will see if somebody is having little trouble remembering something, suddenly intellect goes helpless for a period of time. I can't remember this means there is nothing I can do about it. Though unconsciously that memory is still there, just because you are not able to retrieve it, intellect feels helpless for that little bit of time. So this is called as buddhi. The next dimension of intelligence or I'm using the word intelligence instead of mind so that there is a distinction in language. The next dimension of intelligence is referred to as ahankara. This means, there are many ways to look at it. People usually say it's ego, but essentially it's identity. Because the way you identified, that is the way your intellect will function. Now if you say, I belong to this nation, your intellect will function just to protect that identity. If you say, I belong to this religion or race or caste or creed or gender, whatever, accordingly your intellect functions, because intellect is essentially guided, it is a survival process. If you identify with something, intellect will consciously, constantly go around that trying to protect that identity. So, in the yogic system, we consider the ahankara or the identity that you take on far more important than the nature of the intellect itself, because intellect is a slave of the identity that you have taken. Once you take a certain identity, intellect will function in a specific way, only towards that. And what is right for you, what is wrong for you, everything is dependent upon how you're identified. So the third dimension of intelligence is called manas, where there are 8 dimensions of memory, starting from elemental memory, atomic memory, evolutionary memory, genetic memory, karmic memory, articulate, inarticulate memories, conscious, unconscious memories like this, 8 dimensions of memory. Now, how you access this huge silo of memory? Right now, we have a human form only because of the evolutionary memory that's invested within us. If there is no memory, well, if you eat, you may change the human form into something else. Only memory is so strongly instilled in every cell in our body, that is why it doesn't matter what we eat, even if we eat dog food, right now because we are under lockdown, it can happen. Even if we happen to eat dog food, we will not become dogs, we will still remain human simply because of heavily invested memory, evolutionary memory in our system. Similarly, genetics, it doesn't matter, you eat Indian food, you won't become like me, I eat European food, I won't become like you, because there is a genetic memory which clearly is established. Like this, there is karmic memory and other aspects of memory. But how you access this vast amount of memory simply depends upon how you're identified. In which way are you identified? How strong your identity is, accordingly you access this memory. Though this data is there, this data is processed based on your identity. If your identity is very nationalistic, now this data functions in that way, you're willing to live and die for that identity. These days, people are in Europe, they're even identified with their football club, they're willing to live and die for it. So it may look ridiculous for somebody else, but football club is more than a nation for someone else. It's more than a religion, it's more than a race or whatever else which anyway people are willing to live and die for. So essentially, the identity, if it is consciously established, then there is a bigger possibility. So in yoga, always we are trying to establish a cosmic identity. Because if you establish a limitless identity, your ability to access this vast amount of memory which is there in every cell in our body is greatly enhanced, and that is how a human being suddenly seems like way above what everybody else is functioning. So one human being functions way above that because his ability to access this enormous amount of memory which is recorded the whole evolutionary process on this planet. The very development of life on this planet is living within us, but can you access it or not is the only question. So, a very limitless, at least we cannot see the limits. To that extent you take the identity, you take the identity with the world or with the universe or the cosmos or whatever you think is the biggest thing out here. So, the next dimension of intelligence is called chitta. Chitta means it is an intelligence which is unsullied by memory. There is no memory at all. This is just pure intelligence. This is the basis of creation, that today if we eat a fruit, this becomes a human being within us in a few hours, simply because the fundamental intelligence of the creation itself is functioning within us and it is free of all memory, there is no memory in it. No memory means it is limitless. Memory is a boundary that we have set. Now, this is in my memory means this is my boundary, that is not in my memory means that is not in my boundary. So a dimension of intelligence which is free of memory means it is a limitless possibility. So in the yogic sciences, the mischievous expression of this is, if you access your chitta or this dimension of intelligence which is free of memory, we say, God will become your slave.